Hello and welcome to this course about frenemies, cliques and bants, and thinking about how to support our teenagers with them. This is one of a series of courses for parents and carers that has been commissioned by Resilient Rutland, who are a National Lottery funded programme. I hope that you'll find the following modules helpful. They're designed to help aid some of the conversations that you might be having with your teenager when they're navigating the rather tricky years when it comes to friendship. Good luck. I feel like I keep giving the same advice again and again about listening and allowing your children to talk. That's because it's one of the most important things I can tell you, and really, regardless of the topic, providing these gentle spaces where our children can begin to explore what's on their mind and start to unpick it is a really important thing that we can do as a parent or carer or other supporting adult. So let them talk. Let's do more listening and less talking. A few tips that can help you here are that we should listen to understand. So we're not listening with a view to what we're going to say next, but rather listening with a view to really taking on board what is being said by our teenager. We should be curious. Ask questions, open questions if you need to help explore and help them explain a little bit more about their thought processes and what's going on for them. Roll with the silence. It might feel awkward to you, but we need these spaces in order to get our thoughts in order sometimes, and when you don't fill the gap, they often will do. And remember that sometimes these conversations might feel a little bit circular. You might feel like you're going back over the same ground again and again and again. That's okay. Sometimes it takes a few times round for your teen to get to grips with what it is that they're thinking and what it is that they might do next. So be a little bit forgiving if you feel like you're hearing the same thing a few times. This is how we begin to process and think about what next. Finally, don't feel like you've got to fix things here. It's not your job to go in and tell them what to do, and definitely not your job to do it for them, but rather just to provide a soundboard. You can create that space in which they can begin to explore what's going on, they begin to name it so they can tame it, and they can begin to explore about what's next. They don't need you to change the situation. Sometimes they will, but they generally won't need you to change the situation. They just need somewhere safe where they can begin to explore it, and often they'll come up with some suggested ideas of their own about what to do next, and sometimes they just need to offload what's going on for them. An absolute cardinal rule when it comes to supporting your teenager with their friendships or their fallouts is that you must never, ever put their friends down. Even if it feels like they're inviting you to do this, never do it, because the only thing that's really predictable about teenage friendships is that they're really unpredictable, and the person who they are doing down one minute will be their best friends the next minute. So it's really important that we don't involve ourselves in any kind of chat and negativity about a friend who is no longer a friend, who might be a friend again next week. That's never ever a good thing. So just step back. If your teen wants to have those conversations and talk negatively about someone, we might kind of encourage them to explore this with compassion and kindness, but what we certainly shouldn't do is to join in with them. A kind of potential exception here is if someone is being actively unkind, and we might begin to wonder about that. We might think about potential next steps. But something I find very helpful always to remember here is if someone is being actively unkind, whilst that's not okay and we might need to think about next steps here, remember that hurt people hurt people. So if someone is being unkind, we need to just wonder, why is that happening? This is often indicative of something that is a problem for the person who is causing that hurt. It's also important that we don't put a teen's friends down, because even if they're not the flavour of the month right now and your teen doesn't really feel a kinship to this particular person, when you put their friends down, no matter how tenuous that link might feel right now, it can often be something that a teen will take really personally. And if we say anything that is at all unkind or puts someone down who they kind of in some way relate with, then they can see that as kind of something of a personal slight. It might feel like if your teen is putting down a friend that you will build a bond by joining with that, but often what it actually does is it creates distance between you. You'll usually find that the teen will align themselves with the friend who they were previously putting down, and you're against them, and it's kind of created an us and them that you perhaps didn't intend to. So never put the friends down. And then just final thought on this, really, try to role model compassion and kindness as much as you can when it comes to talking about both their friends and your friends as well. Remember that you are always a role model here, so think about how you talk about all the various different people in both of your lives. Compassion and kindness is, I hope, what we would look to role model insofar as we can. If your teenager has opened up to you about some challenges that they're facing with their friendships, a really useful question that you can ask is your version of, what do you hope will happen next? The reason why this is a helpful question is because quite often teenagers will begin to explore these difficulties, these challenges. They'll talk about all the difficulty of the now, but they don't actually have a vision for what they want things to look like and feel like. And so if we try to focus them on that, how they want things to be or to feel, then it makes it much more possible to work towards that goal. And that sounds kind of really jargony and businessy or something like that, but basically if we don't know how we want things to look and feel, it's really hard to work towards making that happen. So by asking questions like, what do you want to happen next? How would you prefer things felt? What do you hope will happen tomorrow? Those sorts of questions, then it can help them to sort of, harness their thinking and look forwards to what they want it to be like. And that then provides the way into them thinking, and what do I need to do about that? What are my next steps? So you can follow up with questions like, what could you do next to help it to feel that way? Or what's the next thing you could do? What's something that you could do today? How can I help you today / tomorrow to help you get a little bit closer to that? So trying to turn a big kind of nebulous problem into a coherent kind of plan of action. Basically, we're trying to work out where we're trying to get to, what do we need to do next in order to make that happen. When we break things down like that, it just makes it feel more doable, and we can begin to move forward from what might feel like quite intractable issues when it comes to friendship. If your teen can't identify what they want to happen, and this will happen quite a lot, then instead you might say to them, what do you hope doesn't happen? And when we flip it and we look to the negative, then that can be as informative as asking what we do want to happen. So what are they worried about? What are they hoping will not result from this? What's the worst case scenario? And then we would do a similar process of saying, what would we need to do to prevent that from happening? What are our next steps here? When we're beginning to explore kind of what the problem is, what we want to happen next, then we can begin to think about, is this problem a problem of the situation? Is there something that can change? Or is the problem really about how I feel about things? So is the problem kind of out there? Is it something we can impact on and change? Or is the problem internal, and actually what we need to change is how we feel about the way things are? So you can do things here like wonder aloud about, I wonder if the problem here is actually with the way that things are, or if it's with the way that you feel about it. I wonder if what we need to be thinking about is how to change things, or how to change how you feel about things. And you'll be able to find your own words and phrases and ways of beginning to explore that with your teen. But it's quite helpful sometimes to disambiguate that and try and understand, is the problem out here or is the problem in here? And sometimes, of course, it's a slightly messy mixture of the two, but essentially there are some things that we can change and some things that we can't, and sometimes we're able to take simple steps to change the situation. Sometimes it's something we've got to live with. It might be that a friend has made friends with another friend and there is some jealousy or worry or upset on the part of your teen about this new emerging relationship, and they might not be able to change this relationship. They might not even want to, but we might want to think with them, I wonder why it is that you feel like that. I wonder how you could begin to feel a little bit differently. What can we do? What can you do to begin to impact on how you feel? Because you can't necessarily change the situation. You can also encourage your teen to kind of reflect inwards and think about whether there's anything that they are doing which is exacerbating the situation or the feeling. So in terms of exacerbating the feeling, sometimes that's really dwelling on it and going over and over and over and really exposing themselves to the thing that is perhaps causing upset or anger or distress. And in terms of the situation, we might think about things like their interactions with the other people, whether they're in places or with faces which are causing distress and where there's some discord right now, for example. Just reflecting with them about whether they are doing anything or thinking in any way which is actually making the problem worse. Are they part of the problem here, or are they part of the solution? I guess is a question we might explore. But make sure that if you do that, that your teen knows you are on their team. When we begin to explore this and we begin to think, are you doing anything to make this worse? Then they might think that you think it's their fault that everyone's fallen out, or that, you know, this banter is happening or whatever. So we need to make sure that they know that we're on their team regardless. We're not trying to finger point and say this is all your fault. We're just being curious here about whether there's anything that they're doing or any way in which they're thinking or feeling that they might be able to impact on that might help things to feel a little bit better if it changed. And with regards to that, the idea around change, again, we can think about this idea of locus of control, which we thought about in other courses. This is the idea that there are some things that we can change. We can change sometimes how we think and often how we behave, but there are lots of things that we can't change. We might not be able to change how others think and how others behave, for example. So let's think about what we can change and take steps towards that. And then let's think about what we can't change and how we take steps towards tolerating how we feel about those things. It can be helpful here to encourage your teen to step into the shoes of others and actually try and take the viewpoint of different friends. So you might think about this situation from multiple different points of view. This is something that teens are not always great at. Some are brilliant at it, but they're not always great at, and actually it's a really great life skill to develop. So just generally using this in your conversations with teens day to day, thinking about things from the point of view of others, how do we think they might be thinking and feeling and what might they do next, can be super helpful. But particularly when it comes to these kind of ongoing rumbling friendship issues, and when people might think or behave in ways that don't seem to make sense to us, just stepping in their shoes and wondering why can be really, really helpful. And this is particularly helpful sometimes if someone is doing something that is hurtful or hard to understand. Step into their shoes and just begin to wonder why. What might be the things that are going on here for them? As a parent, as a carer, one of the things we can do brilliantly is just to kind of be there. Be there in the background, checking up regularly to make sure things are kind of okay. Don't wait until there's a problem and then think about how to access this with your teen and get the conversation going, but rather think about how can you provide regular moments of connection and check-in with them. So if there's been a problem, or even if there hasn't, just ask them how things are going. Have a bit of a discussion about what's going on with their friends. Try to be kind of a little bit there, a little bit ready to listen. And you can think about how to do this in different ways, because some teens will happily chat away with you about this and you might have that kind of relationship. Others won't, and that's okay, but we need to try and think about if there are different ways into those conversations. So it might be, for example, that you keep in touch with your teen by sending them the occasional text. Even if you're in the same house, that's okay if that's the way that you best connect. And finding some way, whatever it is, post-it notes, text, words, whatever it is, finding small ways to connect with your teen, even about tiny frivolous things. This is like leaving a little trail of breadcrumbs so that if they do become a bit more lost or things become a bit more challenging, they can follow those breadcrumbs back to you and seek your support, help and guidance if they find that it is more needed. If we don't maintain that communication just because things are kind of going okay, then when they come to a point where they might need you, they want that input, it's much harder actually to reopen those lines of communication. So we keep them open all the time. We connect over the little things in ways that work for us. So connect often. Sometimes they'll have stuff to share, sometimes they won't, and that's fine. Just be there unconditionally and make sure that you remind and reassure your teen very often that you are always on their team, that you will love them unconditionally, and that if there is any problem that you are here and you will always make the time to listen to them. Maybe not for hours on end if you're very, very busy, but you will give them your whole self for small quantities of time because you do really care. So there you have it, some really simple starters for 10 in terms of supporting your teenager through those more challenging years when it comes to friendships or lack thereof. There are so many different ways that we can go kind of deeper into this topic, but I think that what we need to do first is to establish some sort of ways of being with our teen, ways of connecting with our teen, and making sure that we don't fall down any of those common pitfalls. So in particular here, making sure that we never do down our teens' friends, even if it seems like they're inviting us to do so, and that we provide a good place for them to come to and they know that they will be heard if there is a problem that they need to share. Remember also, you are a role model first and foremost. How your teen sees you treat and talk about your friends will provide a bit of a blueprint for how they treat and talk about their own. I hope there were some helpful ideas in here. Thanks so much for watching.